Hello, everybody, and welcome to Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk. I'm your host, Alex Brasky, alongside my co-host, Ajay Cybulski. Here for the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. Each week, we'll discuss Buffalo's favorite football team, along with all the comings and goings from Orchard Park. What's up, AJ? Tell the people what we have in store for them today.
A new background for me today here in beautiful Batavia. Where else would you rather be than right here, right now? So, in a new little spot here, talking some Bills football. We'll discuss Buffalo's OTAs from this week, some takeaways, some thoughts as we move forward, as minicamp is really just about a week away. And then we'll also talk about Gable Steveson, the new signing, the former gold medalist, Olympian wrestler. And then we'll give an update on Von Miller's health. He spoke to the podium, to the media. He didn't speak to the podium. He spoke to the media from the podium on Tuesday after Bill's OTAs. And finally, Stefon Diggs spoke to the Houston media for the first time. So we'll touch on that as well.
All right, after a strong week one in view of the media, the offense has struggled the past 2 weeks. Not sure how much it matters at this point of the season. We'll broach that topic a bit later. But the defense always seems to be ahead at this time of year of the offseason. The pads aren't on yet. There's no physicality. The defense is allowed to fly around out there and take chances. And it just seems always at this time of the year, the defense is ahead of the offense all the way kind of through the beginning of training camp until the offense starts to put together that rapport and that chemistry that they look to build throughout the season. But as I said before, how much does it matter to you, to the fans, do you think? This time during OTAs, I know that we're all locked in, us that cover the team and those diehard fans, but when you look at an overall grand scope conversation, how much does this time of year truly matter from your eyes?
Yeah, not really much for me, especially when you're talking about an offense that has so many new pieces. And I know they still have Kincaid and Knox returning at the tight end room with James Cook coming back, coming off a great season. But Khalil Shakir, and I know we've mentioned this a lot, but Khalil Shakir, you can maybe throw in Justin Shorter, but he never really did anything last year. Was mainly an IR guy that practiced a few times later in the season. But Andy Isabella, Khalil Shakir, those two are the only really guys that return from this offense. So for a group of guys with a brand new offensive coordinator and Joe Brady, who's really trying to take the reins of this offense in his first full season with a bunch of new pass catchers, you really expect the defense to be ahead of the offense at this point, just because of the fact Sean McDermott's still there. Bobby Babbage has been working with these guys. I know they've lost Poyer and Hyde in the back end, but you look at a guy like Mike Edwards, who does have experience in this league, and then pairing with a Taylor Rapp who was on the team last year and has some familiarity with this defense. So you look at the defense, you have Milano, Bernard, those guys kind of in the defensive line. There's a lot of similar faces on that end. So you expect right now the defense to be ahead of the offense in that regard.
Yeah, and you mentioned, I think, Justin Shorter and also KJ Hamler, two players fighting in that wide receiver room, both absent from OTAs on Tuesday. We'll give you the full rundown and take attendance later in the show. But first, we want to tell you about how the defense has been stifling the offense the past couple of weeks. And it really all starts with Damar Hamlin. A lot of talk throughout the offseason about Damar Hamlin last offseason for obvious reasons, his return and his working his way back from that scary moment in Cincinnati. But that is well in his past now. I'm sure it still weighs heavily on his mind. But in terms of his football career, he's now looking to move forward and carve out a role on this year's team. Last year, it really seemed like his roster spot was kind of solidified due to the circumstances surrounding the injury and the team wanting to give him a chance to prove himself coming back from that. You remember he filled in for Micah Hyde a few years ago and spent plenty of time on the field. So really wanted to give the player a chance. But now I think it's time for Hamlin to continue to put these type of plays on tape during practice. And then once preseason and perhaps the regular season, if he is to make the roster, once that rolls around, to continue to put good tape on display. But he's really stood out these past couple of weeks. He had an interception last week. This week, he batted a ball up into the air. Josh Allen may have forced the throw a little bit. Deion Jones came and ran under it, able to make the play and able to provide a good return as well. So a good play for Jones, another player trying to make the roster. But let's start with Hamlin. Just these past 2 weeks, really two good moments for him in his pursuit to make this roster. And I think it was kind of viewed as an outside chance leading in to this offseason with what the Bills are looking to replenish at the safety position, maybe look to move on from them, look to bolster that position a little bit more. But hey, if he's going to be a player that contributes at this level, this is a player that you're going to have to keep around.
Yeah, definitely reiterating the point from last week about Hamlin. He needs to stack these days and continue to provide some splash plays, I would say, throughout OTAs, which he has done, maybe in different retrospects. Last week, an interception. This week, a tipped ball that forced an interception or a splash play. But you just want to see Damar Hamlin continue to do that. I think he's a guy that really has an opportunity here to take that leap if he can again string together these days. You have the safety room that I'll always mention, but you're really fighting for on the back end of Cam Lewis, who I think is a very versatile piece that really can be played anywhere in the nickel, on the boundary of special teams, at safety if needed. But Adi Delaney that has starting experience, at Daquan Hardy, the rookie from Penn State, that they're trying to probably implement as a slot corner, maybe a backup to Teron Johnson, but also the punt returning ability. So Damar Hamlin's really fighting for a spot between some of those names I just mentioned. If he can continue to make splash plays, which again, Sean McDermott's defense over the course of his tenure with the Bills has been a defense that creates splash plays. They're a big team that creates turnovers, and that's what this Bills defense does. For Sean McDermott to see Damar Hamlin, now 2 years removed from that scary incident in Cincinnati, making these types of plays early on here, I think that bodes well for what Hamlin is going to become, and he's really going to push for a roster spot come August.
I already mentioned how polarizing of a player that Hamlin's become within the Bills fan base, and you just see it when you tweet out these updates from practice. Both of these weeks, there's really no middle ground when you tweet out when Damar Hamlin makes a play. It's either people are rooting for him or against him for whatever reason. It seems jealousy or whatever it seems to be. It doesn't
The human
seem
condition. The human
right,
condition.
right. It doesn't seem to me that Hamlin has done anything for fans or otherwise to root against him, but you have seen that the past few weeks in the comments, and that's really been tough to see. But yeah, I think that the path for him to make the roster is still unclear, but obviously taking steps and positive steps at that in the right direction. I think when it comes down to Hamlin, we'll really see more from him once the pads come on. I think that's what everyone was waiting for last season, and you got to see a little bit of it in training camp and throughout the regular season. But this offseason, it'll really be full go once those pads come on at training camp, and it'll be interesting to see if he can carry over the success that he's found at OTAs once that does happen. But elsewhere on the secondary, Kaiir Elam also helped make a play on Tuesday, or nearly came away with a turnover, getting a hand on a near interception ball, I believe tipped into the air, maybe an overthrow. I can't exactly remember. I think it was another forced pass from Allen to Mac Hollins, and Elam got a hand on it, but unable to come away with the interception. Elam, another player trying to stack the days. And we heard from defensive coordinator Bobby Babich before practice on Tuesday, and he just spoke on how Elam has a clean slate going into this season. I think it was really tough for him to find a role on this team last year for whatever reason, whether he and the positional coach didn't really mesh well together, whether it was his performance in practice or otherwise. But I think this year, entering with that clean slate, a new positional coach that comes in, Jamil Adai, who you've really seen work well with him, and another example of that on Tuesday during a drill. Elam seemed to go through it the first time. Adai, maybe not barking at him, but really making sure that Elam is doing everything really to the T, exactly how the team wants, as he tries to really make that strong pursuit for a contributing role this season and a role on game day, something he found hard pressed to come by last year. But this might be a make or break year for Kaiir Elam. I mean, next year he's still on a contract, and then you have the fifth-year club option, but he needs to start making some hay in this room, and there's really not going to be a better opportunity than this season with the loss of Tre'Davious White. You're looking for depth at that position. He's going to be given the opportunity. He needs to start coming through, as he did on Tuesday, with some of these close plays and some of these contributing plays for the Bills defense.
Yeah, definitely a big season for Kaiir. You felt last year at the trade deadline that maybe he was going to be moved. Brandon Beane spoke after the fact that the trade deadline and said that's not the case. They still believe in him. We still believe in him. He's going to continue to develop here, and we'll see what he becomes. I think with Kaiir, the big thing is going to be the small things. I think the big things with him are there. He has the intangibles. He has the speed. He has the college experience. But it's the little things, like you mentioned, going through drills the right way, learning the playbook consistently, making the right read, getting past breakups in OTAs and during training camp, which he's done here so far during OTAs a couple of times. I think Elam needs to work on being a more consistent player, like you saw from a Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson. Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson were not always this athletically gifted. Like they were these low round picks. Levi was an undrafted free agent. Dane Jackson, a 7th rounder. They weren't supposed to be these really good players, but you know what they did? They studied the playbook. They were consistent as heck in practice, and that's how they got their opportunity. Kaiir Elam needs to learn from that. He doesn't need to be this stud corner, but like you said, with Dane Jackson parting ways this year with the team, Tre'Davious White going to the Rams, it is pivotal that Kaiir Elam not only hits a different ceiling that we've seen in the past, but also becomes more of a consistent cornerback. And I think that's what we need to see from Kaiir moving into training camp and moving into the season. If not, there's some major concerns at depth for the Bills at corner.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. I think it's all about the details with him. We've seen him make some big plays, some interceptions, create some turnovers, but really on a play-to-play basis and remaining that steady force in the secondary, I think is something that he needs to commit to and needs to be able to do, especially the position he's in the roster. He's not one of the top 2 corners on the team. So playmaking ability, although it's great, when you put somebody in a depth position, you're really looking for that consistency, as you said, that Levi Wallace and Dane Jackson really perfected in their role within the Bills system. But yeah, I think still a long way to go for Elam, but he's starting to stack the days and starting to do, I think, some of the things that the Bills are looking for from him during practice. Elsewhere on the defensive line, it wasn't just the secondary that showed out on Tuesday. It was also the defensive line, and perhaps both of those units working together to create some of the turnover trouble and potential trouble in Elam's case for the Bills offense. There were several players who were able to get reasonable pressures throughout the practice. No pads once again in this practice, so it's tough to take anything significant away from the offensive line play. There's not a lot of physicality there. So it's, once again, as I said, I believe last episode, it's tough to really have a strong take on the situation. But hey, the observations are the observations. And Greg Rousseau and Von Miller each won their reps against Ryan Vandermark and yes, Travis Clayton, the international pathway player, respectively. Miller doing so against Travis Clayton. And I know it's a player who's never played before, but he's also been working against La'el Collins, and he's looked pretty good against him as well. Kind of a reclamation project there as well. So it's not really top-tier competition that Miller was doing this against on Tuesday, with Deion Dawkins missing practice, another player who was absent. So Bill's doing a little bit of shifting along the offensive line. But a positive sign for Miller. He spoke about his health and how he's hoping to have a couple more years in the tank after practice, something we'll dive a little bit deeper into later. But good signs from Greg Rousseau and Von Miller, and also Ed Oliver had a play as well, batting down a Mitch Trubisky pass. I had him working against Richard Garage. Sometimes it's tough to tell in those OTA circumstances, but if I do have that correct, which I marked it down in my notes and pretty sure that Garage was there, that'd be a development for Garage, who played exclusively at tackle for the Bills, I believe last preseason. He does have some experience playing guard in the past at the collegiate level, but if he can present that versatility, that would give him an opportunity perhaps to make this team as a depth player on the offensive line. But all 3 players, Oliver, Rousseau, and Miller, spoke after practice. Oliver said that Babbich's system really hasn't changed much after they let go of defensive line coach Eric Washington and promoted Babbich to defensive coordinator, and still have yet to decide who's going to call the plays. But Babbich certainly taking a more vocal role during practice. So I think the familiarity has helped maybe Oliver and these guys hit the ground running early on during OTAs. And another note from their comments post-practice, Rousseau really providing glowing praise for Javon Solomon, another player who shined on Tuesday and is starting to stack the days and starting to trend towards a roster spot and depth role on this team. But your thoughts from what you've observed and what you've seen in the reports from training camp, and just your thoughts overall on this room moving forward. It's good to see in Oliver, Rousseau, and Miller making plays. Though that's the trifecta that they're going to need in terms of their pass rushing room, along with maybe an Epinesa and others. But those are the three that they're going to have to need, or that they're going to need to contribute. And it's nice to see them getting off to a reasonably good start here.
Yeah, that unit's going to have to work together all year. That's going to be the big thing for this defensive line, because they don't have like I've mentioned before, a game wrecker, and that obviously a big concern for me for this defense is that they're lacking that big playmaker. But Greg Rousseau has to step up. Von Miller now practicing, like he said after the press conference. I know we'll get to later, but without the brace this year so far, so that's kind of a big development for him and his health. But yeah, this defensive line just needs to come together, continue to make plays, continue to stack bricks. They're very familiar with each other. I know they lost Leonard Floyd. I know some of the depth pieces like a Tim Settle, Jordan Phillips, they're no longer with the team. But you really have Daquan Jones coming back, Ed Oliver, Von Miller, and Greg Rousseau. I mean, that's really the presumed starters from the past couple of years. So that's the unit that really has the most continuity if you look across the roster. I know the offensive line does as well, and maybe a couple other spots, but this defensive line needs to work together, continue to do what they do, and the more that each player on the defensive line eats, the better for everyone else. So that's the big thing.
And just quickly, Mexico Marty chiming in. Also, John Robert, we'll bring that one back up. Dwayne Carter also had a good performance on Tuesday. He's starting to trend positively as well. Like I said, no pads for these guys, but good to see a rookie doing well during OTAs. But Mexico Marty, going back to the cornerback conversation, seems like McDermott prefers to have the steady hand approach at the cornerback position rather than a high-flying playmaker like a Deron Bland from the Cowboys. So if Elam's going to fit in within the system, he's certainly going to have to gain that consistency. And as Mexico Marty terms it, that boring steady hand. But hey, if you're able to provide that steady hand and be that boring player at the cornerback position, one of the most difficult positions to play in the NFL, I think the Bills would take that. They take boring over a roller coaster ride that it's kind of been for Elam throughout the early portion of his career. But moving on to the offense, it wasn't all defense on Tuesday. There were a few nice plays for the offense. Brian Thompson, a wide receiver, had a couple of big catches down the sideline and turned them into good yardage. But I think what everyone wants to hear about is Chase Claypool, another big catch for him. This one deeper than the one that he caught during week 1 of OTAs, a bomb from Mitch Trubisky down the middle of the field, about 50 yards for a touchdown. Claypool went up, caught it over Cole Bishop, the rookie safety. So kind of not really a concern, but just a note there for Bishop that Claypool was kind of able to win that rep against him. And before we get to Bishop, let's first talk about Claypool as we have before. It's not an easy road for him to make the roster, obviously, with his background and obviously the 6th, 7th option on the roster right now, depending on where you place him. But you have to like what you've seen from him. The Bills have been missing that big play down the field ability the past few years. And with his size and his athleticism and just his skill set overall, that really presents that ability or the potential to have that ability within this wide receiving core. And I'm not saying he's a guy that's going to come out here and give you 50 to 80 catches or anything like that. But if he can give you 20, 30, 40 catches and provide some big plays along the way, I think the Bills would certainly take that with someone that they picked off the scrap heap. And to see him connecting with Trubisky the way that he is, a player that really doesn't press the issue in practice very often in terms of Trubisky, but to see him comfortable enough to throw it deep to a player like Claypool, that just shows you the respect that perhaps this quarterback room has for a player of his caliber.
Yeah, most definitely. And I saw some takes out there talking about the Claypool, and they don't want to hear any discussion about Claypool until the pads are on, or so be it. But you got to remember, OTAs are really all that the reporters can talk about right now. They're going to observe things, and I just think, would you rather hear in a year where the Bills really, really desperately need receivers? would you rather be hearing in May that, or June, late May, early June, that Chase Claypool is dropping the football, unreliable down the field, or would you rather hear that he's making contested catches and being that big play guy that they wanted him to be? In a year where the Bills really need receiver help, I'd rather hear the latter, of Claypool really putting these good days together. Now, again, that might change come training camp. That might not be the case when the pads come on and he really does not progress in terms of his down the field ability or special teams ability or whatever the case may be. But it's good to hear that Claypool is doing well now instead of not doing good. That's just the end of the story. I just don't get why some think that it doesn't matter, because I think it does for a guy that's really trying to build on a career that kind of almost lost itself, and he's trying to rebuild that back, like Sean McDermott said in the press conference when asked about him originally. I just think Claypool is a guy that needs the confidence, build in OTAs, and see what happens come training camp.
Right. If there's any player on the Bills roster where OTAs, minicamp, and the early stages of training camp where it is going to matter, it's going to be for a player like Claypool, who's trying to who turn around his career and kind of change the opinions of everybody that he's really created in terms of his past. But he spent a lot of time after practice as well, working with Josh Allen, working with Mitch Trubisky, working with the other receivers. So I think he's doing everything he can at this point to make this roster. And like you said, it's not that it doesn't matter. You just have to weigh how much this stuff matters and for
Correct.
who it matters at this time of year. I think if Josh Allen is out here throwing a few interceptions and having some miscommunication with new wide receivers during OTAs, not a big deal. But if Chase Claypool was out here dropping deep balls and screaming at his teammates and acting like a diva, like he's been professed to be in the past, I think that would cause an issue. So you
Right.
have to kind of weigh who it matters for and what matters and also how much at this time of year, rather than, like you said, just blanketing, it doesn't matter. Let's just look forward to training camp and
Right.
preseason. Everything matters. It just depends on how much. And I guess that's up for everybody to decide for themselves. But before we fully move on from that topic, Colt Bishop beaten by Claypool on that play, but I think he's looked pretty good throughout training camp, especially just the way that he's looked beside his teammates. His speed really has translated, and it really stands out amongst the other players in the secondary. We have yet to see that physicality that he's known for, which is another thing that he really brings to the table. So I think during a 7-on-7, a no pad 11-on-11 situation, I don't know if that really suits Cole Bishop more so than a game like atmosphere where you allow his instincts to take over and you allow him to play free and come out and just start blasting people. So a lot left to be determined with Bishop. Babich, who spoke before practice, as I said that Bishop has a bright future, but also mentioned that he's still a rookie. And I think that's something that you have to take into account. It might be a little bit of a longer road for a player at his position in the secondary, learning a new playbook, coming in at a position that the Bills have valued over the past number of years. So I think you have to kind of maybe take a step back with your expectations for Cole Bishop, but not to the point where he's put anything negative on display over and over during OTAs. I just think the difficulty of coming in as a rookie in this Bills defense at the safety position just might be a little bit more difficult than people expect.
Yeah, and at Utah, I look at the Utah schedule while you were discussing your perspective on Cole Bishop so far in OTAs. Utah played Washington this year, who has McMillan, who was drafted, who has Jalen Polk, who was drafted, and has Remo Dunze. He's played the Oregons of the world, who had a Troy Franklin, who, although he dropped to the fourth round, was a very productive college player. Josh Cowling from the Arizona Wildcats played there as well. So in the Pac-12, there was a lot of talented individuals. But when you get to the NFL level and you're asked to do more, it's more complicated language. You're going up against a Chase Claypool who's really fighting for his NFL career. I think it really takes a notch up. You're talking way better competition. You're talking players that are fighting for their jobs, their passions, their careers. And Bishop's just a guy that's learning his rookie season, second round pick, and I think he'll be okay. But like you said, the learning curve with this defense has been different for most. Like Terrell Bernard took a year, really didn't do much, and then really exploded onto the scene last year. There's been different scenarios. Ed Oliver really started right from the get-go. I know a top 10 pick, but there's been a lot of different kind of players that were drafted, different roles and such. So I think Bishop just needs to continue to work on learning the playbook, knowing where to be, and that consistency, like we previously mentioned with Elam.
And another new player for the Bills that we haven't necessarily taken a lot of time to speak about right here, right now, live Buffalo football talk, but that's Curtis Samuel, the wide receiver, low-cost player, but he's going to be a significant contributor for this offense. I don't think there's any way around it. Maybe not the most widely discussed addition of the offseason, but perhaps he'll trend that or start trending that way over the next several weeks and months as fans start to be able to lay their eyes on his abilities and what he's able to bring to the table in terms of a versatile player on the outside, and also being able to contribute during or in the running game, as we saw during Tuesday's OTA session. Saw him catch the first pass from Josh Allen during 11-on-11 work, and then came back moments later with took a toss for pretty decent yardage. So they're going to use him as a receiver. They're going to use him as a runner, and obviously that's no secret. 41 carries, 200 rushing yards during that season with Joe Brady in Carolina, added 75 receptions, I think 850 yards receiving. So this is certainly a player that can do it in a multifaceted role for the Bills. And I think he might be the X factor for this offense. You have Khalil Shakir coming back. You kind of know what he's going to bring to the table. You have James Cook, who's going to be relied on heavily. Obviously, so much talk about Dalton Kincaid. If Joe Brady can unlock Curtis Samuel like everybody believes that he can, I think this Bills offense can really take off.
Yeah, for sure. Curtis Samuel is, I would say, an X factor. I could agree with that just because of the fact, like you said, Dalton Kincaid, first round pick from last year. You have Shakir coming back, but what will Samuel be? A couple of down years with Washington with quarterbacks that I probably can't even really name. I know Sam Howell.
I think you and I might be able to throw the ball as well as some of the quarterbacks he's caught the ball from.
I don't know. I mean, I don't I don't know about that, but yeah, I would make the attempt. I would love to throw to Curtis Samuel. But yeah, I think Curtis is a guy that really needs to be a multifaceted guy. They've tried it with Deontay Hardy. They've tried it with Isaiah McKenzie. That really never fabricated itself. McKenzie had his moments. That New England game comes to mind where he just absolutely was just running, crossing routes, back and forth, and Allen was just putting him on the money. That was one of the best games, probably the best game of McKenzie's career. But yeah, I think Samuel needs to be a better version of the Deontay Hardys and Isaiah McKenzies of the world. And I think what he's put on tape so far in his career, along with his 4.3 speed and his ability to get open deep, and like you said, the quarterbacks he's played with, I think with Josh Allen, that's the X factor that this offense will be looking at come September.
And as I said, to lead off the pod, we'll take a bit of attendance here. Players absent during Tuesday's OTAs included Deion Dawkins, Rasul Douglas, Dawson Knox, Justin Shorter, KJ Hamler, Dwayne Smoot, Deshaun Williams, and Nicholas Moreau. With Moreau not there, I think that's what allowed Deion Jones to get some work and come away with that interception. So maybe some increased time and making the most of it there. But really the takeaway here is Rasul Douglas, the only player collectively that the media did not see for all 3 OTA sessions. They are voluntary, and there has been a past with Douglas that he has not attended OTAs when he was in Green Bay. So the precedent has been set there. So I'm not sure if it's anything to be concerned about. As Mexico Marty asks here, should we take anything away from his ongoing absence? I've mentioned in the past where maybe a mild concern there just because it's the only player that hasn't shown up. I think if you're a competitor or a leader on the team or anything like that, I think it's a little odd that you wouldn't at least show your face at one of these sessions as these guys have. But then again, it is OTAs, and as I said before, the precedent with Douglas is he doesn't attend these sessions. So I don't think it's anything to get up in arms about. The 2 that I really took away from this group were Justin Shorter and KJ Hamler, 2 players fighting for a roster spot, not out there at practice. You wonder if they were nicked up at all with an injury or maybe just a previous commitment that they had to get away for. We never know if they're there for the remainder of the week. So the media only gets to view during voluntary OTAs 1 day per week, but they're out there practicing. I think there's 10 total sessions throughout that voluntary time frame, and we only get to see 3 of them. So there's no telling. Also with Douglas, if he was there at those times, but it's just it kind of brings your antennas up when you see KJ Hamler and Justin Shorter there, just knowing how much they have to prove during this offseason.
Yeah, a lot of these guys, they, go to the first couple of weeks, maybe they felt like they've done enough, or maybe, like you said, they have prior commitments where they can't show up. But for the most part, I think a guy like Justin Shorter, again, mandatory mini camps coming up in a week here. KJ Hamler's another guy that's been around the league a little bit longer than Shorter, but injuries, whether it's they felt confident in their game the first couple of weeks at OTAs through the first few sessions, or whatever the case may be, it's not, for me, it's a nothing burger. And with Douglas, I think it's really just a guy. He was traded at the deadline. He's probably still working out, staying in shape. He's 30 years old. He's going into his free agent year. He probably wants one more contract of some sort from a team. He really wants to field that offer. That's probably why he's pushing for a contract extension, because he's at that 30-year-old range where you might start to see the decline. So try and lock up money earlier rather than later. But with Douglas, it is probably frustrating from a competitive standpoint, like you said, and some of the players in the locker room. You probably not get concerned, but you probably wish Rasul was out there because of his impact on the team last season and his basically ascension into that starting cornerback 1A/B role with Christian Benford. But for the most part, I think come training camp, all that will be settled. He's playing for a contract. These guys want to compete, but they also want that money. So I think Rasul will be just fine come August, and hopefully shows up for mandatory camp next week.
Players present, but who did not participate by my count. Mike Edwards, he was out there a little bit during walkthrough sessions, just kind of going through the motions and kind of getting his brain aligned with the playbook before he gets out there and starts running around with his teammates. Dorian Williams, Edifon Ulofoshio, Ray Davis, and Reggie Gilliam also present but did not participate. Another one, Taron Johnson, present but a non-participant. But I think there's something to note there. He was really involved on the sideline with some of the younger guys, some of the new guys in the system, kind of taking on that leadership role that we discussed previously and that Bobby Babich touched on during his media availability, and something that Sean McDermott has also spoken about. Taron Johnson is going to be critical within this defense, not only his play on the field, but really keeping that group together on the back end. A lot of young players, newer players. Douglas only spent half the year in this system last year. I know he did well, but I think Taron Johnson's voice and having him on the practice field, although he didn't participate, something very critical for the Bills on Tuesday.
Yeah, great question, Alex. I listened to that part where Babich responded with, he's really just taking that elevated role. He still had it. He still has leadership qualities. He still has been that for this room for the last few years. But now, obviously, with Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde still undecided if he's going to play. But guaranteed, Jordan Poyer and Tre'Davious White are not on the Bills roster next year, with them both being signed to different teams. And Jordan Poyer is still admitting that the Bills quarterback's the best in the league, but that's for another day. But yeah, I think with this, defensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator Bobby Babich and Rasul Douglas. No, sorry, why am I talking about Rasul Douglas? With the new defensive coordinator Bobby Babich and Taron Johnson, the Bills will have that leadership quality with him, and it's good to see him at OTAs talking to players on the sideline and doing what he's being asked to do, which is definitely step up that leadership role as he enters a pivotal 2024 season.
So OTAs in the books, mandatory minicamp with media viewing on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, June 11th through 13th next week. A lot of the same stuff that we've been seeing at OTAs, just a little more condensed with 3 days in a row there. So maybe a little bit more to be gained from those sessions. And as we mentioned before, keep an eye on Rasul Douglas. Those sessions, as I said, are mandatory when it comes to minicamp. So if Douglas doesn't show up at that point, I think then the concern starts to raise. And yeah, I think then it might come down to him wanting that new contract. But we said before we were going to talk about it, and we will now. Von Miller providing an update on his health during his time at the podium there after practice, and really said that he's looking, I think one of the biggest motivating factors for Von Miller at this point of his career is obviously family, but in a different way that people will think. His sons, he said, are starting to really reach that conscious level where they understand what their father does for a living, and really will start to, if Von Miller is able to return to the once vaunted status, they'll really start to come away with some positive impressions of their father out there on the field. And I think that's really going to motivate him, and he can take it for what it's worth. It could just be lip service. I know when he's sitting there at the podium, people kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. But I think there's something to be said for that. A guy who's getting older, he spent a couple of years ago on the sideline. Last year was a tough road back. He's had a full off season, not wearing that brace, which really hampered him last year. So looking forward, a new opportunity, a better opportunity to contribute this year. He's really looking to put some significant production on the field, just to, for lack of a better word, impress his kids. He really wants to be that role model and everything for his children. And I think that as a player gets older, really starts to become a motivating factor. And he just spoke on that. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Von coming off without the knee brace, like we've both mentioned now, and you have 4 years left on the deal. He said he had a few years left. He feels like he said when you know, when God kind of calls his time, it's his time. That's kind of how he put it. And he also, and I'll quote him, he said that the Miami game, the Kansas City game, and the Pittsburgh game to end the season really, and I quote, springboarded him to where he's at now. So that was another interesting piece to this. I think he felt like towards the end of last season, he had a moment where he felt like he was becoming maybe not what he once was, but better than what he was putting on the field for the first, multiple weeks that he was on the field for the Bills last year. So I think Bond just needs to continue to have that positive mindset. I think that's all you can have at that point. You're not going to stay on the Bills. I'm sorry, but you're not going to be with the Bills until 2027. So there's a lot of probably uncertainty in his head for how much longer he truly has. But again, he said he had a few years left. The knee brace is off. He's coming off another year absent from the ACL injury. So I'm expecting big things for Von Miller. Big things at this point in his career is probably a 6 to 8 sack season. That's where I think I would like to see him. And then obviously a good playoff run where he really kind of amps it up and becomes that closer that the Bills wanted him to be when they signed him back in 2022.
And another topic that occurred while we were on the practice field and then speaking to the players after practice, Stefon Diggs spoke with the media in Houston for the first time since the trade, and really gave Josh Allen his flowers, and said that he really made an impact on his career. Really, both players made an impact collectively on each other's careers. So I think he was kind of saying what he needed to say in that situation. Also spoke on the trade. I think called it a breath of fresh air. Can you dive into his comments maybe a little bit deeper, and just your takeaway as someone not far removed from your fandom and just really connected with the fan base? What has everyone been saying about the Diggs situation since he was traded to Houston? From what I've seen, it's really been on one side of the coin, and it's really a lot of people have turned on Stefon Diggs after he was let go from Buffalo.
Yeah, Stefon Diggs is always such a tough conversation to have because he's going to say that. He's not going to go up there and say that Allen was this or that. I made Josh Allen. Although his brother, who he's very close with, basically has said that multiple times on multiple occasions. So you feel like maybe Stefon Diggs might feel a little bit that way too. And now that he's in Houston with CJ Stroud, he's kind of like, well, Joe Brady didn't use me the last half of the year. He mentioned that the offensive coordinator changed midseason. He kind of felt like a trade was brewing at that point, at some point, because of the fact that the OC switch and his usage towards the back half of last season. But the Stefon Diggs is just so fascinating to me as a player, as a person. Every time he steps to the podium, I listen. Maybe I don't always believe what he's saying, but I do listen. And Stefon Diggs has had he's had some of the best, honestly, press conferences since I've been listening to mostly every press conference over the past couple of years. Probably one of the best speakers, on the Buffalo Bills roster. When he spoke, people listened. He's had obviously his moments where there's been some controversy, but for the most part, I think Diggs does respect Allen. I'm not going to say that I know that, but he's obviously helped him become the player he is. And I think there's always going to be mutual respect there. It didn't end how it probably they wanted it to. They never got it done. But at the end of the day, it's two all-time greats that put the pads on together for 4 years. I mean, that means something regardless of how it all turned out.
Final topic here before we move on and look forward to next week at minicamp. Gable Steveson didn't get a chance to speak with him after practice and get his reflections on his first action out there on the football field. But we did see him after practice working with a group that was working with Coach Sean McDermott for quite a bit of time after that practice, really just working on the fundamentals and really the basics of defensive line play, some push-pull fundamentals and stuff like that. But we spoke with Ed Oliver after, as I said, and he was really glowing in his praise of Steveson. Maybe not in terms of his football ability yet, but just his raw athletic ability. He says the athletic ability is there, and it's just been good to talk to somebody who's the best at what they've done, which Steveson obviously is, having won that Olympic gold medal. But yeah, for sure. Excuse me, as I lost my train of thought, something popped up on my screen. Oh wow, we're getting promos for Muck Dogs live streams here.
I was trying to tell the people make sure to like, comment, share, and rate the Right Here Right Now pod. And it looks like, yeah, like you said, the Muck Dogs are Wednesday, June 5th. That's tonight.
It is. Travis Kelly, shout out. But anyway, Steveson, not sure how quickly he'll be able to acclimate himself to the football field. He's really a small player. You look at him stand beside some of these defensive linemen and some of these players at the other position. And really what stands out with him is just his slight stature. He's not a tall guy. He's not a real thick guy, really relying on his speed and athleticism. I'm not sure he'll ever become a capable run defender in this league. I think obviously his path to a roster spot or a contributing role will be as a pass rush specialist. But even with that, or maybe on special teams in terms of the new kickoff rules, something like that. But I think he's got a long way to go, and his size will certainly be a limiting factor.
Yeah, Steveson is a fascinating prospect. It really feels like Sean McDermott had probably a good say in that signing just because of the wrestling background. And Sean McDermott probably wishes that he was a gold medalist guy. I know he really takes pride in wrestling the sport, really tries to spread awareness. I know every year at training camp at St. John Fisher, he'll wrestle some fans some of the days. So he really tries to implement wrestling into his kind of coaching style. And to see him kind of after practice, Dad Brown shared the video and of him kind of teaching Steveson kind of how to use some technique and stuff like that. It was pretty cool. He was probably right in his element, right where he wanted to be. But yeah, Steveson, like you said, Alex, I don't really know the expectation you can put on a guy that's never played a sport. But you can't doubt the strength, the commitment to his prior sport, his ability to be an athletic freak. He's fast. He has really all the tools. But to learn football in your early 20s and kind of learn a whole new sport, walking onto an NFL roster, first of all, is crazy to even think about. But second of all, really, who knows what he's going to be? And I think maybe just getting the most out of him and getting to learn from him, maybe learning some stories about how he became to be so successful, to spread that to the locker room of success and achievement and feeling that glory of being a champion, I think will also help this Bills roster, not just what's on the football field.
All right, so that's going to do it here for this episode of Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk, presented by the Batavia Daily News and Livingston County News. AJ, any parting thoughts here as we look ahead toward minicamp? It was maybe not a lot, but there was certainly a significant amount to take away from OTAs. Like I said before, it depends on the person, how much weight they're willing to put on those takeaways, but players stood out. Players certainly stood out positively and negatively, I should say. Maybe tough 2 days for the offense the last 2 weeks in front of the media, but like I said, a long way to go here during the offseason.
Yeah, just another week of Right Here, Right Now, live Buffalo football talk with myself and Alex. Please make sure, like I said, and tried to put on the screen before everything just blew up, in the comment section. Make sure to like, comment, share, rate on all platforms. We greatly appreciate it. We'll continue to build here as we get into a dry period for about a month and a half after this mandatory minicamp, and then training camp really picks it back up. So OTAs, like Alex said, take away what you want, be happy regardless, and live your life. So it's been a fun show. Thank you for everybody for tuning in, and we will see you next week, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right, AJ, that's going to do it. A jam-packed show, and we really fit a lot in, I thought, as we always do right here, right now. But thank you to everybody for tuning in. AJ already told you to like, subscribe, and share the pod. You can find it on all audio platforms coming up shortly after the show. But thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Peace out.